Naam?
Johan Reyneke,
Beroep?
wine grower from Stellenbosch, South Africa.
Wat was je eerste wijn?
Mijn eerste wijn was Chateau Libertas, which is a affordable red blend for a student.
En je laatste glas was?
Reyneke, Chenin Blanc, 2015.
My guest today is the most famous biodynamic wine grower of South Africa, maybe one of the most respected ones worldwide, and a true philosopher.
Thank you.
As you will notice. Johan Reyneke. Welcome, Johan.
Wow, thank you for the kind words and thank you for having me, and so nice to see you again. It's really a pleasure.
Likewise, it's a true pleasure. One thing we need to clear up first is that people always say, wow, Johan Reyneke, he's a great winemaker. But you are not a winemaker, right?
No. There's a lovely lady who lives here in the Netherlands. Her name is Dagmar. And
founder of
𝐏𝐄𝐑𝐒onalities. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And she came to South Africa many years ago.
Cheers, by the way.
Cheers.
The Reyneke 2015.
There we go. And she worked a harvest with me.
You founded your company in?
Yeah, so about 2000. And it started very...
Reyneke Wines.
Reyneke Wines, it was humble beginnings. It started in a cow shed, literally. And then it kind of grew, slowly but surely, initially. And when she left, I said to her, you know, with all your experience and education, share one gem with me. And she said, always try and surround yourself with people better than you. Otherwise, you limit your business to your ability. And I thought that was so wise. And that's what we did. So today, I've got a young gentleman called Ishan. And he's a fantastic farmer and wine grower. And a lady called Barbara, and she's an amazing winemaker.
And the cellar master is still Rudiger Gnetschel?
Yes. So Rudiger Gnetschel is the cellar master, and he's been involved with Reyneke wine since 2008. We converted from conventional to organic in 2000.
Yeah.
And then you have to be organic for 3 years before you can go for biodynamic, so 2003. But we never bothered with certification. And then there was quite a movement, especially in Scandinavia, supportive of organic and biodynamic wine. And then what ensued, unfortunately, was quite a bit of greenwashing. So to give us credibility...
Already?
Yep, already. We then thought, okay, let's go the certification route. And in hindsight, I learned a lot from being certified. And it was very interesting and informative. An administrative nightmare, I'll be honest, and quite costly, but it does give transparency and credibility and third-party endorsement to who we are and what we do. That was 2006. Sorry,
2006.
Yeah, that's when we got the first Demeter certification. Yes.
Yeah.
We started with 1/4 hectare of organics. And today we're on 120 hectares of Demeter certified biodynamic farm. About 70 of that would be under vine. And the rest would be an equal split between wilderness or rewilding of the farm and also pasture for the cows and the animal husbandry that we practice as part of the biodynamic system. And we grew out of the cow shed into a proper wine cellar, and we're about to grow out of that wine cellar, and we start with the building of the new cellar next year, 2025. Yeah. So exciting times. I think there were a few momentous occasions in Reyneke wines. The first would be when we started, obviously. And the second was when Vinoblogie joined. So Vinoblogie is a distribution company, and they were very effective at that. And I remember we were walking around the farm and looking at the amazing soil and everything else. Eventually we walked up a lane of trees.
With
Tim.
Tim, yeah.
And he then said, listen, that's a deal. If I can have 50% of Reyneke wines, I will help you to get that. And I had a week to think about it. And a week later, I went to his house in Franschhoek, and he lit a cigar, and we signed the contract, and I never looked back.
Was it a hard decision because you maybe fear to lose your core values or your autonomy or something like that? Was that a doubt in your mind?
It was, and I obviously felt intimidated because here I was a young guy.
With dreadlocks?
Not anymore, but the recent dreadlocks. Yeah. And if you get an investor and they just bring money, it's quite an expensive form of finance, literally, because you have to pay them forever, as opposed to the bank that you can just pay back a loan. But if you can get a partner that can bring a strategic contribution to the business that you don't have, that would be something to consider. And what Tim brought was this ability to distribute and get the wine out there, and it makes no sense in making wine if you can't sell it. So that was a big plus. But I did feel intimidated because he was a very successful big businessman and I wasn't, and there are lots of stories where the small guys get sort of eaten up by the big guys and spat out along the way, but luckily that didn't happen yet. Well, something I wasn't comfortable with in philosophy is that I've found that it could become very academic and intellectual, and I wanted it to be applicable in living and in life. I just kind of leaned towards environmental ethics, and I really thought about my role in nature as a person, and in an ever-changing world with less nature and more people, even more so. And I think that was a very good background, because with knowledge comes obligation. You can't really unsee what you've read or what you've become aware of. And then I also, as a student, for some pocket money, I worked as a farm laborer in the vineyards. And I worked on a number of different vineyards, and well, all of them were conventional. And I really didn't feel comfortable working with herbicides and pesticides and fungicides. So it was a combination of what I read in the evenings and what I experienced in the daytime. And then I just wanted to farm without chemicals. I had no idea that there were concepts like biodynamic farming or organic farming. And then I just tried to find people who could educate me about farming without chemicals, farming with nature. And I came across this lady, and she was very well known for her quality of her produce. She didn't grow grapes or make wine, but she was
biodynamically.
But she farmed biodynamically. So initially, she just taught me the basics, and then after a few years, took it a few steps further.
That was Jean
Malherbe, yeah. We had a few neighbors that stood together. And we had this roving team of farm workers, of which I was also one, that would work on the different properties. And then on my parents' farm, I took the first steps of farming without chemicals on a 1/4 of a hectare of pinotage, and it was a disaster. I had every weed and pest and plague and bug and disease you can find.
It popped up.
It was a chaos, and then I was really upset because I thought I was doing the right thing, and clearly it wasn't working out. And then my philosophy lecturer actually told me that he had heard of this lady who farmed differently in a nearby village, Jean. And then I met her, and she came to the farm, and she said, "My dear, you are organic by neglect. You need to be so by design." And then she started with a process of re-education. And what I can say today is, if you're organic, you're all about being sustainable. But if you are biodynamic, you go beyond being sustainable and you focus on being self-sufficient. So what you do is you align different organic systems in a sort of a synergy of sorts to create this circular economy on the farm. And that to me is the real essence of biodynamics. And there are of course the biodynamic preparations. There are 8 of them, they're numbered 500 to 508. I think one can explain a lot of the biodynamic methods in a modern scientific way and get to understand them. But I also have a healthy respect for the bits and pieces that we don't understand and that we can't necessarily quantify from a scientific point of view. And I like to keep some space open for the bits and pieces that we don't yet are able to explain everything in scientific terms. I believe there is still a bit of magic undiscovered out there. Within 6 months, I could see the life come back to the soil. It was ridiculous. It went from really hard, compact soil to like a chocolatey brown, beautiful, structured soil, just by using the preparation 500. The vines, and the manure in the cow horns. Yep. The wine changed completely, the approach to wine changed completely. Instead of controlling and dominating nature with chemicals in the vineyard and then in the wine making process, we kind of took a step back and tried to, minimum intervention, do wines with wild yeast ferments and things like that. And it gave us a completely different wine. It's a wine that is singular and unique, and there's a link between that wine and where it lives. And it's unadulterated. But again, it has to be so by design and not by neglect. Should we pour you some wine?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There was a very nice quote that I heard from you in a podcast by Vinoblogie, by the way. And you said, sustainability is a 3-legged chair. You have to look after money, people and nature. Unfortunately, the sad truth is you can exploit nature the longest and get away with it. People the second longest, but when you run out of money, the business stops immediately.
True.
So, apart from having high ideals and principles, you are obviously also very realistic and pragmatic.
I learned the hard way. You learn things quickly when you run out of money. Yeah.
Not dogmatic at all, that's how I've always known you, but how idealistic are you still? How did your idealism evolve along the years? 20, 25 years of farming biodynamically, or 20 years?
Yeah, 24. 24 years of farming biodynamically. It's interesting. I think, one changes a lot over time, like vines do. You have young vines, it's fruit everywhere, and then you have old vineyards, and they have lower yields, but there's a lot of flavor density and complexity and that kind of thing. So, becoming older, I like to think that humans are the same, and that there might be less fruit, but there might be more wisdom. But this idea of being idealistic, it's perhaps been tempered with reality to a certain degree, but it's still, I think, part of me as a person. I think that's something you carry in you throughout life. It's just, this I don't know if it's optimistic or idealistic, but it is this belief that there is good out there, and that even in challenging times or difficult times, as uncomfortable as they may be, they're almost necessary for growth. It's a bit like the vine, you have to prune it for it to be able to grow well, and I think people are the same. So there are times when my idealism is challenged, but so far I've managed to go back and rekindle that flame every time, and I hope I can continue to do so. You can spend days trying to look for a solution to a problem and you don't get it, And then if you immerse yourself in nature, it's almost as if you ground yourself, and then it just comes out of the blue. And my favorite place would obviously be, well, obvious to me, would be the sea. I find, I love the sea, and I feel it's an amazing space. I find it very healing and energizing and humbling, and it's one of the last wild places that we still have, is especially
if you look the right way to the sea.
Yeah. You see, in
the right direction.
And where I live, it's wild. It's like on the bottom of Africa.
Yeah.
And you have orcas, and you have sharks, and you have whales, and you have dolphins. So when you go there, you're a guest, and you become alive again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes feel complicit in an industry that is polluting, energy wasting, water consuming? Does that make you feel uncomfortable every now and then? No.
It makes me feel uncomfortable often. So I think, again, one must use these uncomfortable feelings to propel one in the right direction. So if you look at agriculture in general, it's one of the 5 biggest drivers of global warming. So as a farmer, that sucks, because that means every day I go to work, I'm one of the 5 biggest drivers of global warming. But if you change it around, and if you farm in a regenerative fashion, you have one of the 5 strongest levers to affect positive change.
So the farming is carbon negative?
Absolutely.
At Reyneke Wines?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
the winery
awesome.
still
Winery we're working on.
Yeah. Ah.
And my dream is, when I retire, maybe to get a skipper's license and sail the wine here. We are here.
Let's go inside.
We have the camera.
Johan, could you tell us that story about the time you met Nelson Mandela?
It was an amazing story. Before I started Reyneke Wines, I worked as a vineyard worker as a student to get some pocket money. And it was really cold one day, and I went home and I put my wetsuit on, and I put my work.
Because you were a surfer.
I was a surfer.
From age 14 already.
Exactly. And then I just put my wetsuit on, and I put my clothes and my work uniform over the wetsuit, and I went back to the vineyard. And I thought it was quite cool, but then I looked at my colleagues, and they were, all they did is they took newspaper and they put newspaper in their pants and in their shirts and in their shoes to stay warm. And I thought that wasn't cool, because, you know, wine is such a beautiful product. And here, you know, you can't make good wine from bad grapes. At the time I read the work of an Indian philosopher, a guy called Amartya Sen. And Sen said, if you want to empower people, you give them choice.
And this is the cornerstone
project. This is the cornerstone project, exactly.
Yeah.
So the wine, it's a Bordeaux blend, but we call it cornerstone.
You're still producing it?
We're still producing it.
It is a cornerstone of Reyneke Wines?
It's the cornerstone of Reyneke Wines, and it serves as a memory of the importance of the workers in any business. They are the cornerstone of that house. So the bank came, there was no money, and it was really quite a disaster, because I thought we couldn't afford to pay the bonds on the houses anymore. We wouldn't be able to pay for the education for the kids, and the business would also flounder. I would be declared insolvent. Nobody was going to hire a philosopher, so it was a bit of a drama. So this lady came for a wine tasting, and she happened to work for CNN, which I didn't quite know at the time, and she tasted the different wines, and we tasted this Chenin and the Sauvignon Blanc and a Syrah, and when we tasted the cornerstone, asked me, why all the wines have cultivars on them, but this one has a name, why is that? And then I was completely honest, and I told her the story that I just told you, and that was probably the end of the road, and she was going to be one of the last people to ever drink Cornerstone. And it was my lucky day, because this lady was looking for wine for the Africa Journalist of the Year Award event in Johannesburg. So she flew me up and took up a lot of Cornerstone to put on all the tables. And that night I had to hand over the prizes to the winning journalists. And I got the names wrong. And I was young, man. I was in my 20s, and the lights intimidated me. And there were like 2,000 people in the hall. It was absolutely crazy. I was completely out of my depth.
But during that evening?
It was the next morning.
Okay.
I woke up and I went to breakfast. And then in the door walked Nelson Mandela, or Madiba as we like to call him. And it was something else. You could literally feel his presence as he walked into the room. And I was completely out of my depth. I had no idea what to say or what to do. And I got there. It was my turn to greet him. And he took my hand, and I was lost. I couldn't think of a single thing to say. And I think he was quite used to having this effect on people. So he just smiled and he said, just relax and tell me, what is your name and what do you do? And then I was like, okay, what is my name? What is my name? What is my name? And I couldn't remember my name. And then it just came all of a sudden. And I said, I'm Johan and I'm a farmer. And then the moment I said it, I regretted it, because this was just post-apartheid. And he was the freedom fighter, and he spent a long time in a small room because of apartheid. And I was white, and I was Afrikaans, and I was a farmer. So I was like the worst of the worst of the worst. And the moment I said it, I regretted it. And he just didn't skip a beat. And he said, so Johan, vertel my, hoe gaan het met ons boere? And that was amazing. He was a one-of-a-kind person, and definitely one of the highlights of my life to meet. Madiba, the one and only. We miss him as a country. I wish we could have him back. Or as a world, actually. He was a good leader. We need more people like that. Cheers.
Cheers to that, Johan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wish us luck.
It was a privilege having you here.
Likewise.
Cheers again.
Thank you, Perswijn magazine.